Today we're going to explore one of the most detailed and honestly, one of the most fascinating pictures in the entire Bible. It's a divine blueprint that God gave to an ancient people right in the middle of a desert. And what it is really is a story about separation and closeness, about a holy God and, well, a flawed humanity. And it all centers on how a simple, physical tent became this incredible roadmap to understanding God's ultimate plan to be with us. So let's dive in. Now, to really get why this blueprint was even necessary in the first place, we have to start with the core problem. The great reformer Martin Luther, he famously said that our biggest, most difficult enemy is the one we see in the mirror. It's ourselves. And this was never, ever more true than for the ancient Israelites, right after they had just experienced their greatest miracle. So picture this. After being dramatically rescued from centuries of slavery in Egypt, you'd think the Israelites would be unstoppable, right? Full of faith, full of gratitude. But their journey into freedom quickly revealed something else. Escaping Pharaoh? That was actually the easy part. The real battle, the real enemy, was internal. What's so wild is this pattern that shows up almost immediately. God performs this massive world-changing miracle, and literally 3 days later, the people are complaining about bitter water, so God provides sweet water. Then they complain about having no food, so God sends them bread from heaven called manna. But the ultimate betrayal, the real shocker, comes while Moses is up on the mountain receiving the law. The people get impatient, and what do? They build a golden calf, an idol, and start worshiping it, breaking the very first commandments God was in the process of giving them. And this right here, this is the central crisis of the entire story. See, God wants to dwell with his people. He wants to be right there in their midst. But he is perfectly holy, and they have just proven themselves to be deeply flawed, unfaithful, and just so prone to rebellion. So how can perfection and imperfection possibly coexist in the same space? It's a huge dilemma, and it needed a solution. And God's solution? Oh, it was just breathtaking in its detail and its symbolism. He didn't just give them a set of rules and say, figure it out. No, he gave them a visual, tangible, architectural blueprint. He gave them the tabernacle, this portable temple that would show them step by step how a holy God could make a way to live among an unholy people. And here's the crucial point. Nothing about this tabernacle was random. Every single material, every measurement, every piece of furniture, it was all part of an intentional pattern that God himself laid out. You can think of it like a heavenly lesson plan brought down to earth, designed to teach the people exactly who God is and what it takes to approach him. Okay, so let's walk through this divine blueprint together. I want you to imagine you're an ancient Israelite approaching the tabernacle for the very first time. You can't just stroll right into the center where God's presence is. No, there's a path you have to follow, a series of steps, and each one teaches you something profound along the way. The very first thing you encounter is the altar. This is where the sacrifices were made, and the message here was absolutely unmistakable. Before you can get any closer to a holy God, the problem of your sin has to be dealt with. A price must be paid. But it doesn't stop there. After the sacrifice, the next stop is the laver, this large basin of water. Here, the priests had to wash themselves, and this symbolized that after your sin is dealt with, you also have to be made clean, you have to be purified, set apart for service. So sacrifice first, then cleansing. That was the order. So once you pass through that outer court, you come to the tent itself. But the journey still isn't over, because at the very heart of the tabernacle, past another layer of separation, was the most sacred and restricted space on the entire planet, the Holy of Holies. And listen, this was not just any curtain. The sources describe it as being as thick as a man's fist. I mean, this was basically a wall made of fabric, and it was a powerful symbol of the profound separation that still existed between God and humanity. Behind this veil was the place where God's glory literally dwelled, a place so holy that only one person, the high priest, could enter, and he could only do it once a year. And what exactly was behind that veil? It was the Ark of the Covenant. And inside this sacred chest were 3 items that told the whole story of God's relationship with Israel. There was a jar of manna, that heavenly bread, to remind them of their rebellion and God's faithful provision, that he is the bread of life. There was Aaron's rod that had miraculously budded, a symbol of God's power to bring life from death, a picture of resurrection. And finally, there were the stone tablets of the law, the very commandments the people had broken at the foot of the mountain, representing God's perfect, holy standard. So you have this entire intricate system, the sacrifices, the cleansing, the priests, that giant fist-thick veil. It was a powerful, powerful lesson. But here's the kicker. it was also a shadow. It was a temporary picture that was pointing forward to a single moment in the future. A moment when the entire system would be fulfilled and everything, and I mean everything, would change forever. And here is the crucial connection that unlocks everything. The New Testament explains that the physical veil in the tabernacle was a symbol, a prefiguring of the physical body of Jesus Christ. Now remember that, because what happens next is one of the most dramatic moments in all of history. At the very moment that Jesus dies on the cross, the gospel writers record that the massive, fist-thick veil in the temple was torn in two. But they add this critical detail. It was torn from top to bottom. Now, why does that matter? It signifies that this wasn't an act of man. This was a supernatural act of God. The veil, symbolizing Jesus' body, was torn at the very same moment his actual body was broken. So what did this mean? Well, it was nothing short of a revolution in our access to God. Before this moment, that wall of separation was firmly in place. Access was limited, it was indirect, it was temporary. But when that veil tore, the wall came crashing down. The way into God's very presence was thrown wide open. Through the sacrifice of Christ, what was once forbidden to all but one man once a year is now open to everyone who believes. The separation is over. Okay, so the tabernacle is long gone. The later temple in Jerusalem is gone too. So what could this ancient blueprint possibly mean for you and me today? Well, this is where the story takes its final, most personal turn. The blueprint isn't for a building made of wood and fabric anymore. The blueprint is now for us. Because of what Christ did, the very presence of God that once dwelled in that super exclusive Holy of Holies now comes to dwell inside every believer. We become the new temple. The dwelling place of God on earth is no longer a physical spot on a map. It's his people. So if God's presence now lives in us, how in the world do we build a life that honors that holy, incredible reality? So how do we build? Well, an early piece of wisdom given to Israel actually gives us a powerful blueprint for this. Moses was advised to build the nation with leaders of strong character. And this isn't just about politics. It's a perfect guide for constructing our own inner temple. The foundation is being capable and God-fearing. That establishes your core character. From there, the blueprint gives us guardrails against the three great temptations that can mess up any temple. Honesty and truthfulness guard you against the corrupting lust for power. Hating unjust gain, loving justice more than profit, that guards you against the all-consuming lure of money. And moral purity protects you against the destructive power of lust. These ancient principles are timeless tools for building a life worthy of God's presence. In the end, this incredible story of the tabernacle reveals God's relentless, passionate desire to be with us. He laid out a path through sacrifice and cleansing, a path that was perfectly and completely fulfilled by Jesus, who tore down that wall of separation once and for all. So now the honor and, the responsibility of being his temple has been given to us. The blueprint is in our hands, and the only question left is, how will you build?